Live.
Yes.
Hello, people. Spread it around.
Yes. Hopefully it will be that people will be there to listen. If not, that's fine too.
That's fine. Don't tell me you're already tired.
No, a little bit.
Wow, this music is very happy-go-lucky. All right. You are listening to an episode of Transparency and Merit. My name is Joe, and I'm here with Brian. And we're going to cover a very interesting topic, Stoicism and Luck.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. What's going on?
So, an incident happened that put me through a bit of depression, and I'm not talking about the recent passing. I won't even get the recent news that's been pretty big about Kobe Bryant, but there was other news that just put me through a depression, and then I finally got good news, and I was kind of shameful about it and the way that sometimes I go about things. And it's like a weight has been lifted off of my shoulders. And I could have had, the situation could have been very dramatic, and I could have had to find a new place to live. And I'm very lucky. So I'm wondering, because it could have worked out in another direction. And I'm wondering how much Stoicism, like people that are Stoics, are also, like, who are good Stoics, are also rather lucky or well off. Because, I don't know, I mean, part of me thinks that a lot of times when people have a lot of tragedy, or if they're going through stressful times, how well they deal with it. I mean, and it's very difficult to put your mindset when things are going, like when the stress is going right there at the time. Now I can kind of reflect back on it, and in a lot of ways, this was shame and guilt of the things that I had done myself, and I had kind of contributed to the problem. And now the problem has subsided, and I can get into that kind of Zen, Stoic state, but I certainly could not have gotten into it had
Well, if you had to be looking for a new place to live, for example, like that.
Yeah, I mean that's very stressful. I can't just
would have caused a lot of turmoil in your life.
Yeah, and emotions are involuntary. I mean, you stop me if you disagree, but I think emotions are involuntary. They're not necessarily something that like we can just shut off.
I tend to disagree.
Really? Okay.
To some extent, and I'll tell you to what extent. All right. So, anger and fear and joy, happiness. I mean, these are all things we're going to feel at one point or another, and without our awareness, sometimes like almost like a subconscious, overwhelming feeling created by whatever kind of circumstances are going on around you. Sometimes they happen for no reason, apparently, seemingly, but in the case, and I don't want to get too personal because I know about what you're talking about, and I don't want to go into details about what happened, but yeah, it could have been a bad situation. However, I think a lot of what you were feeling was brought on by fear, and sometimes, and maybe fear of the unknown, or even more, fear into what you have been programmed to accept for as a result of your actions. So maybe, and I'm not saying this is what happened to you, but maybe you had seen somebody go through or do something that was similar to what you went through, like the way you handled something, and you saw them treated in a ridiculous way because maybe it was on a sitcom or a TV show or an old movie, or maybe it reminded you of some sort of scene that you had adapted or adopted into your way of thinking. Maybe even without you knowing it, you just kind of maybe you kind of in your mind had worked out how things were going to turn out in the worst case, based on what your memories were of maybe these previously learned scenes. So, and I'm just theorizing here, but to some extent, it's the way we're programmed, and that's so important. Is to be able to go back and understand how did we learn to have a certain set of values, and you have high standards, and you are a person who your intent is not to leave the house in the morning and hurt people. I think you have a good intent. Your intent is to get through the day and stay positive, do the best you can, work hard, like these sort of ideas. And when you have that kind of intent, I think that people with good intent tend to have better luck. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, that may be true. But you always kind of. I do often. Basically, I often prepare myself for the worst, and I kind of dwelled on the worst possible scenario.
Yeah, but is that really necessary? Knowing what I just said, your intent is generally, you want to help people in your life. You want people to help you in return. And you almost kind of demand, I think you know this inherently, like you do good because you want other people to do you right. And it's a fair way of looking at things. And so, did you need to have a negative look at the worst case scenario? Probably not. Probably not, because your personality, your reputation, your past diligence for handling things the right way, and if you don't know, maybe it catches you off guard sometimes, but not knowing isn't always incriminating. Sometimes it is. So anyways, that's just how I'm looking at this.
Yeah, I gotta say that, for me, it's been a learning experience, and there are things that I did wrong that hopefully this can kind of lead me to change certain aspects about my life, and hopefully I can do things kind of for the better. But at the time, regardless of what you would say to me, the worry and the the worry and the doubt are still going to be there. And I don't know if talk therapy.
That's because what you just said was very defeatist. In other words, you can't adopt a change in that area? Are you doomed to that sort of way of thinking? Or do you simply think that in some weird way it actually helps? The outcome is always better than the worst case scenario for you? Because
I always, for me, I always think of the worst case scenario, and then when that doesn't happen, I feel much, much more relieved. And I was thinking that the worst case scenario was going to happen, and it didn't. And so I'm very grateful that the worst case scenario did not happen. And I think to a degree that's part of Stoicism, is to have, to a degree, very low expectations on the outcome of the situation. And then when things happen that are better, you end up kind of feeling better because the worst didn't happen. So I was, hoping for the best, but I was, expecting the worst, hoping for the best. And I think that, to a degree, is a good way to look about it, and just take responsibility for everything that I do, and try to have empathy for others, because people do make mistakes. People are emotional. People are human. And it kind of, for this, was kind of a learning experience, because, I at times have been harsh on people who've made mistakes. And it's, to a degree, made me a little bit more forgiving, I guess, to a point. Although my ego and my temper still get the better of me. And there are people that I think, like I said, for me, I think that individuals who have power, particularly in this country, particularly within the social media and stuff, seem to rule over it unfairly, and they basically use laws and stuff to gain power, and then they kind of slip and take it back, and they're hypocritical and stuff like that. And it does make me angry, but it just, to me, now I feel like, it's not as much of a bother anymore, because people are unfair, and situations are, and it was, for me, I was being unfair with the way I acted and I behaved to make the situation worse. So to a degree, it makes me see another perspective on things. Sometimes I don't, I slip away from it, but this situation with where I was living made me think differently. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but sometimes when you go through a harsh time and you get to a degree a little bit of forgiveness, you want to do that with others. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And if you could summarize what you just said.
Well, yeah. Well, look, I mean, I was in a situation where I thought I was going to be, perhaps even evicted from where I was living. And, it was a lot of it was my fault, and it was the way in which I was doing things and the way I was going about things. And now that's not going to be the case. And, I'm grateful for what I have now, and it's made me even that much more grateful for that. Also grateful for my job, and, it makes me want to try harder and do better. I'm still, there is still a part of me, I'm still addicted to YouTube, which I watch, every time I get home. I'll watch certain people, and I do the comment section thing, and I still tweet to people. Unfortunately, Twitter was a place where you could go and have conversations That's not the case anymore. There's a lot of shadow banning and other things going on. So I was doing that. But to a degree, it isn't that stoic to do things like that, to battle with people that don't want to hear you and trying to chase them down. It's not the way I want to be. I don't want. If you don't want to have a discussion or a talk with me, why am I going to chase you down? Because before, and still sometimes when I lose my train of thought, I have an urge to say things to certain people, and it's something that I believe to be true, but that's hurtful, but it's not. It doesn't work, and right. It's not. I'm really getting nothing out of it. At the end of the day, and I'm the only thing I'm doing is probably pissing off that person. And at the end of the day, these people hear things all the time that, they've heard all kinds of things that pissed them off. Why are they going to want to deal with me? And if, like I said, if they can't deal with my opinions, why do I want to chase them down?
Right.
Why do I want to talk to them anyway? And I gotta, but sometimes I forget myself, and I have the urge to engage people that don't want to engage with me.
I think you'd benefit from something called mindfulness training. I don't know if your work offers it or if there's private ways to get it by you, but mindfulness I think would benefit you tremendously. In the case of facing, like we said, thinking of, this is where I find fault in always approaching a potentially serious situation, being prepared for the worst. And yes, Apocalypse says mindfulness training. I've seen the benefits of that firsthand. I've used it many times. I've written reports about it, the whole bit. I've done research on it. It's very valuable. And there's plenty of resources for, as far as the benefits, the documented benefits, and evidence-based data. All that stuff is available on mindfulness training. It's super effective. And there's all kinds of different sorts of people that offer that kind of training, from just yoga to basketball to just straight, talking, like counseling, to any kind of applications to real life situations, work especially. But like in the case of, and now what I was referring to before is thinking of the worst case scenario, and facing potential eviction. If had you been, and I know maybe you think, there's laws out there's tons of laws, and hopefully you didn't break one of those laws kind of mentality. Not the best way of going about it. If you had known all the renter's rights, right? If you understood that contract you've signed, which is a huge thing, you would automatically have eliminated that fear. You would have eliminated that time that was used to consider the worst case scenario, which was probably, and I was certain, but without having looked at your own, leasing contract, I wouldn't know for sure. But just hearing the situation, I knew in my mind, this is not like, there's no worst case scenario here that, would balance having to worry about it. It's just basically something you could have worked out regardless. So, and not to downplay the, your idea of, and what you were thinking of it, it upset you, and, you're almost inconsolable in those moments, but that's where mindfulness could work. And also doing simple diligence by, looking over your lease contract, knowing what exactly the rules are and the potential consequences are, absolutely would eliminate that whole line of thinking.
Even for me, I personally, like I said, I personally did not live up to my own standards of good being a good custodial.
No. Don't confuse the issues. You could have very high standards. You could have your own ideas of what you know to be wrong, right, good, bad, and even disgusting. But does that violate the letter of the contract? That's all that matters in that situation, regardless of how it is to your own thinking, how your behaviors or actions upset you because you had higher expectations or higher standards. That's irregardless of the contract. Those are the standards, not what you've set for yourself. Unfortunately, or fortunately. In California, fortunately, because the renters' rights are insane. It's very difficult to evict somebody. Almost impossible. It's almost like firing a teacher. Very hard to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still, I still want to do the right thing and be fair. That's my main thing.
Well, unfortunately, that's probably not the best route in a business situation, in a contract situation. In other words, nice guys won't always, won't always finish first.
Yeah. That may be true. I mean, and like I said, it's, like I said, for me, I was grateful the situation handled it and the person wasn't that upset and, that things turned out. And like I said, for me, I was preparing for the worst. And for me, it gives me extra incentive to do better and to work harder. And I did a little bit of it, but I still, there's always room for improvement. And,
yes.
mindfulness may be a good step.
Just something to think about. And oh boy, what do we got here going on here? You slowed down so slow. Did you forget the chat board?
What do you mean?
Have you looked at the chat board?
Let me take a look here.
You're not being mindful.
In his waning years, MM has taken up the horrible contempt in his belly button. And
in his waning years, MMM has taken up the hobby of contemplating his belly button.
Who is Nimbuster, by the way?
I have no idea. Except that Nimbuster seems to always be around.
Yes, he is. I think he's done a few shows.
I do know one thing about Nimbuster. I think he had a problem with the bottle at some time in his life.
Well, I have a problem with compulsive overeating, and I mentioned that in my Stoic forum.
Oh, he's just
today.
a tug. Okay.
And on my Stoic forum, I asked, let me see here. This is one of my Stoic forums. I belong to a few Stoic forums on Facebook. And I asked, how does one overcome compulsive overeating? And someone said, keep yourself busy, find worthy hobbies. Another person says, slow down the speed with which you eat. When I was on the heavier side, I would wolf down my food without enjoying what I was actually eating. Slowing down the rate at which I ate made me feel fuller, faster, and made me appreciate what I cooked. And then someone said, finding the underlying emotion you're trying to avoid by overeating. Sit with it and dissipate. And it will dissipate. Drink water instead. And then eat the right food, meat, fat, nuts, veggies, water, no carbs, processed foods, no gluten, no, I don't even know what that word is. And then also, so I had, let me see, I also talked about shame here. Where am I going here? Okay. And my question was, how does one overcome shame? And someone said, empathy from people. Then another person says, realize that you can never change the past, but you can change the future. Focus on who you are being and who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Another person said, you need to constantly find information about it, search for psychological explanations, search for spiritual explanations also. Surround yourself with experience, realize you cannot change the past, and also let yourself sink in the feeling of shame. Don't try to run away or ignore it, and eventually it will pass. I've been through that. I managed it. They managed it. You will also manage it. And cheers. Complete and absolute forgiveness, acceptance of flawed human nature backed with personal accountability to grow from the experienced flaw. What advice would you give a best friend in the same situation? Give yourself the same level of compassion. I don't believe we can give what we don't have. If we cannot genuinely be forgiving and compassionate to self, how can we extend these virtues outward? And it goes on. And someone asked, how do you define shame? So I was going to go into the favorite Stoic movies, and I think I'll do one on Stoic films. Is there anything to add, Joe? Because I think I don't want to go over too much.
Okay.
And
okay.
Yeah, I don't want to go over too much, and I think that we've covered quite a bit of ground here.
Sorry, my phone was just blowing up. But all right, are you sure?
Really?
Yeah, I'm getting some issues from work. To be
Okay.
expected on a unplanned live show. You never know what's going to happen next.
Yes.
We are on the edge of a diving board every time we do this. So,
Yeah.
probably best to plan ahead a little bit and maybe even make some notes. But I think this turned out okay. At least your situation is, you're in the clear somewhat. I'm not sure about the luck thing. I'm not sure how that figures in.
Well, I feel like I was very lucky, and I feel very grateful, and I hope I can learn from this and continue to move forward.
I say it was less luck and more understanding of your contractual obligations will free you from despair in the future.
You might be right. All right, well, I think that'll do it for Transparency and Merit. And those of you who are listening on YouTube, this is on Spreaker, but we also go on YouTube as well. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment below if you have anything to add. If you don't like it, and if there's anything that we missed, please leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you, even if it's negative. It's better than nothing.
Also, I've been throwing around some ideas, and I think that maybe in the next week or two, I'm gonna ask the audience for something. And our audience is small, but I want to start compiling some data on our listeners that are not the demographic nature, but I want to get into that next week. I'd like to know more about you, who you are, and maybe find some sort of correlations to some of the topics that we are covering, and I'll be more clear on that, but we'll get into that next week, I think, when I get my thoughts straight. And also, leave a comment if you think that we would be good to live stream on YouTube or one of those places where you can live stream. It's an idea that we're toying around with, and maybe you'd like to see our ugly grills live on the air. Who knows?
I doubt that. All right, well, that was good dealing with you. So, yeah. All right, Joe, let's call it a day.
Done.